Hey there, my name is DG Valdron. This is my attic. Welcome. So, today we are going to talk about Alien Earth and why this series exists and why it needs to exist, or maybe why it doesn't. All right, let's back up a little bit. The Alien franchise itself. Alien is basically the story of a boogeyman. Okay, there's this big scary monster that comes out of nowhere, knocks off the crew one by one, and eventually gets defeated. Now, there was this perspective of the alien as a rape monster, that a lot of what it was doing was a metaphor for sexual assault and for very dark sexuality. And that was really powerful at the time. Well, James Cameron basically dialed it up to 11. Okay? He had more aliens, he had more grunts, he had grunts with firepower. And it had Sigourney Weaver, who was a brilliant actress. And from there, the franchise kind of stumbled. I mean, because a lot of the elements, mainly this dystopic vision of the future, and this working class vision of the future, which I think was pretty unique. Um, I mean, that's wonderful background. That's wonderful backstory. There's wonderful production design going on in it. But that's not enough because fundamentally, it's about the boogeyman. Okay? So every rendition of Alien since then has basically traded on the notion of the boogeyman, who becomes more and more familiar to us and more familiar to the characters, and the bits and pieces of a dystopic, grunt oriented, sort of working class vision of the future. Okay. The trouble is, those background elements by themselves are not really strong enough or vivid enough to really carry the franchise, so we have to keep coming back to the boogeyman. So now we come to Alien Earth, a series which isn't terribly bad, but doesn't really have a lot of ideas going on. Watching the series, I think what struck me is that it's really hard to evaluate because we haven't really seen the whole series. It's just it ends up on a cliffhanger. So all the ideas, all the little issues that it's playing with, none of these are really resolved. None of these are really developed to any extent. So it's almost like, yeah, I'm trying to review half a movie or half a television series. Difficult. Um, I guess there's a few things that really strike me with Alien Earth. One is that there doesn't seem to be a likable character in the whole thing. I mean, really, there's, Wendy's brother, whatever his name is. He's kind of like a sort of at best, a background side character. And then there is that woman who's downloading children into the replicant bodies. And she's kind of like, yeah, a little bit sympathetic, but you know what? She's out there doing the dirty work. She's sort of the nicer version of Dr. Mengele. And that's it. Everybody else is either completely disposable, as is the guy who's implanted with an alien, um, or they're just awful. Boy Cavalier. Uh, okay, teenage wonder kid, and he's so mannered with it all. He's walking around in his um, loose fitting clothes and going around barefoot and sticking his feet up on tables and just so in love with his own genius and quirkiness. And even the name, Boy Cavalier. The guy looks like he's in his 30s. Um, he's a case of arrested development. And I think in the final episode, one of the replicants or synthoids or whatever they call themselves says, yeah, you've got an extreme case of ADHD there, boy. But he's a singularly unappealing narcissistic character. The lost children, who were downloaded into the synths, at first they seem nice, but it becomes clearer and clearer as we go along that, they're not really an appealing bunch, except for, I think, the two, the East Indian boy and the black guy, who really are like 10 years old, and they act like 10 years old with a cloying, grating naivete, which is really runs thin really fast. Uh, all the rest of them are, you know, pretty awful. I mean, the red haired one is clearly a psychopath, swirling around the drain. You've got uh, Jane, who is a selfish conniver, and then you've got Wendy, who seems like a protagonist. But the further along we go with her, the more sociopathic she becomes. Um, the the black cyborg um, is basically a chilling and awful person. Uh, Discount Roy Batty, Kirsch, I think his name is way too closed in and inscrutable, and very much clearly an operator on his own. So there's nobody that we really emotionally attach to. There's nobody that we really find ourselves engaged with or rooting for or following. And I think that's a problem for the series. You have to have some kind of anchor. You have to have some character or some characters that you're going, oh, I hope they make it. Well, not so much. That's difficult. But one thing I'll say about this, and it's both a strength and weakness of the series, is that the production values, the production design is just amazing. This really does look like the far future. This really does sell itself. Um, but oddly, you know what? They've dispensed with that whole crapsack future low tech vibe that, we saw in the first few movies, where, people are basically traveling through space in what is essentially a pile of, lowest possible bid junk. Now, this is all high end. We're going to Boy Cavalier's, lost island of, lost children, Neverland. And so, no expense is spared. It's utopia. And we get hints that the rest of the world is more or less a pretty crap place to live, except that we don't really see all that much of it. We get glimpses of it at best. And so we spend most of the episodes um, in this really high tech, really sciencey, futuristic techno polished environment that could have been in Star Trek. Uh, and so I think they've abandoned one of the central mythos or one of the central paradigms of it still. And I will come back to this. The production design is absolutely beautiful. It is amazing. And all the dollars that they spent absolutely up there on the screen. So what about the Alien? As each movie has come along, both the audience and the characters in the movies have become more and more familiar with it. And that's death for a boogeyman. Okay, that's death for a lot of the rape monster thing, for a lot of the underlying symbolism. It becomes a rubber mask, and the effect begins to dilute. So in the first movie, it's mysterious. You never really get a good look at it. In the second movie, you get a good look at it and it's blown up. In the third movie, well, they're sort of kind of familiar with it. They know what they're dealing with. I mean, there's Sigourney Weaver explaining to everybody on the prison planet, yes, this is exactly what we're dealing with and how we're going to deal with it. Okay. Fourth movie, it's a lab rat, basically. That's the entire thing. In the fourth movie, the alien is a lab rat. Um, and uh, then the next two movies in the crossover with Predators, um, it's just well, it's just old home week. Um, And I mean, the Ridley Scott, I have no idea what the hell Ridley Scott was doing. I mean, um, and then we came to Alien Romulus. There are so many that they've actually become forgettable to me. So, Alien Romulus. And the thing with Romulus is everybody on the ship, you know, everybody that was on the derelict abandoned space station, yeah, they knew what they were dealing with. It was just completely, it was completely a lab monkey. Once again, in Alien Earth, the alien is just yet another lab monkey. And they've tried to juice it up by throwing in a whole bunch more aliens. So there's the eyeball alien, the plant alien, the giant fruit fly alien, etc. Um, and you know what? I think they're all kind of disappointments. I mean, the original Alien was inspired by H.R. Geiger, and he was delving really deep into some very creepy psychosexual stuff. Is any of that psychosexual baggage present with any of the new alien critters that we see? The other aliens, the plant thing, the fly, the eyeball thing? No, no, not at all. They're just sort of random, bizarre, creepy crawlies. Okay, so you basically abandoned any of the deep psychosexual stuff in this in favor of kind of random stuff. Uh, it's a little bit of a disappointment. So, how does the series itself really work? This is one of those series I think where the parts, the individual elements are really a lot stronger than the whole. And I guess I'm being a little bit unfair because, as I've said, it ends on a cliffhanger. So we don't really know. This is like half the show. This is half the series. This is like half the movie. And we don't know what they're going to do to develop it or where they're going to develop it. One of the potentially scariest, most disturbing uh, bits Alien of the Alien movies is the notion of an invasive species. Like if this thing actually gets to Earth, then it's just going to be bad news for all of us. You have a super fast, super dangerous, super stealthy human predator that, wiped out a human colony. Well, okay, so your series is Alien Earth, but for the most part, the alien itself is a supporting character. Okay. Um, there's the character of Kirsch, who's kind of really interesting because he's mysterious. Nobody really knows what he's getting up to, because of his hair. He's called Discount Roy Batty, and he's one of the few actors whose names I remember, Timothy Oliphant. And he's sort of playing a somewhat mysterious character who seems to always know more than what's going on. Seems to be a step or two ahead of everyone, and seems to be playing different sides. You don't really know what he's doing, except at the end, we still don't know what he's doing. You have the Lost Boys, the group of children downloaded into these synthetic bodies. Um, and are there some discussions here of free will, of what it means to be human? We see this kind of coming up with the synthoids and the cyborg, the black guy's a cyborg, the quest for immortality that we see with Boy Cavalier, who is genuinely aging, um, whether he wants to admit it or not. His shtick is gone old. But I'm really not sure what they're doing with that or where they're going with it. Boy Cavalier sees himself as Peter Pan, and so he sees his creations of these children transplanted into adult bodies as, Wendy and his Lost Boys. And so he's trying to impose the novel, he's trying to impose the mythology of Peter Pan onto this world, which doesn't really hold up. And one of the things that's happening is that as the series progresses, we see that the fit is less and less effective. That it's not even close to the fantasy that he's trying to live out. And so I guess it's kind of a comment on hubris, the hubris of Boy Cavalier, this kind of arrested development that he pursues. At the same time, it makes the comment that if you put children's minds into grown up superhuman bodies, yeah, that's kind of a recipe for trouble because you know what? Children are by definition immature. They lack the growing experiences that we all move through in terms of puberty and adolescence and adulthood, and all those things that knock off or rough edges. And so, at the end, uh, basically, you have a group of narcissistic sociopaths who are themselves just as awful as Boy Cavalier, kind of taking over or thinking that they're taking over. So, where are we with Alien Earth and what are we doing? Honestly, um, the bits and pieces are interesting enough that I want to keep following. The work as a whole is not selling me, but individual characters, individual stories are kind of compelling. There's things that I really liked about it. There's the flashback episode where they depict the fall of the spaceship, and it's almost an image for image remake of Alien, um, and that's actually quite fun. Some people have complained that yeah they've dumbed characters down right across the board, but then again, I'm not necessarily convinced that's a bad thing because I think what's going on is that the writers um, are basically giving you their own vision of the working class and perhaps their own vision of the production process of the working people that they know. I think that the writers are Hollywood and the idiocy, the near autistic behavior, the sort of backbiting and deranged priorities that we see on fake Nostromo as it is heading towards its certain doom may well strike me as a rendition of the Hollywood process. So instead of, your working class people taken from more or less life with Yaphet Kotto and Harry Dean Stanton from the original movie, now you've got now you've got sort of the Hollywood production process with, backbiting and vaguely autistic people, everybody sort of pulling off in their own direction, but trying to kind of like hang together, but not doing a very good job of it. I think the ultimate verdict I have with respect to Alien Earth is that it is interesting. It is an incomplete work. It is a work with wonderful production values. And I mean, just in terms of sitting there with your brain off and watching, oh, it's a great watch. It's beautiful. Every scene, every frame is just, gorgeous to look at and fun. Um, the big handicap is that the alien as a creature itself is so well known, so iconic, so commonplace now that it is neither strange nor surprising to the audience, nor even really to the characters in the series. And that was always going to be to be the problem. So, I mean, my bottom line, no, if there's a next season, I'll watch it. It is, and this may be damning with faint praise. This is not the worst Alien franchise production you have ever seen. not by a long shot. All right, signing off. See you later.